Good evening. My name is George Williams. I'm the Dean of Law here at the University of New South Wales, and it's really wonderful to see so many people here tonight for this wonderful event. I'd like to begin by welcoming Dr. Peter Mackenzie, who's going to give a welcome to country here tonight. Peter is a well-known Aboriginal figure from the La Perouse Aboriginal community in Sydney. He's had diverse experience as a practicing artist, as a musician, a project manager, a university lecturer, an Aboriginal ambassador overseas, researcher, and a representative for many organisations. Peter studied a Master of Fine Arts at UNSW before completing a PhD in Creative Arts at UWS and was awarded a Fulbright Scholarship in 1994. Can you please join me in welcoming Peter to the stage?
Thank you very much. I feel a little underdressed, by the way, so don't look too hard. What you see is what you get, literally. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Here on the occasion of Miss Magda Szubanski's presentation entitled Thrown to the Lions, which I'm sure is going to be a most entertaining and informative event for all. My name is Dr. Peter Yanata Mackenzie, and I am a descendant and elder from the La Perouse Aboriginal community, just down the road here on the shores of Botany Bay. On behalf of the current La Perouse Local Aboriginal Land Council, our elders and community members, and especially the memory of our Karigal, Maruora Dial and Gamagal forebears who traditionally occupied this part of the Sydney coast. I most warmly welcome you all here today in this Aboriginal country. As you may know, the Welcome to Country is our contemporary interpretation of receiving visitors who wish to visit areas within our traditional lands, or as we call it, country. This ceremony allows us to pay respect and to acknowledge our elders of all cultures and religions, past and present, and to reflect on our many shared stories and histories. What I hope is that you all will arrive back at your home safely tonight, knowing that you were made very welcome to this place, which we original Sydney Koreans still call our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter, for the welcome to country. This event tonight is part of Social Sciences Week here at the University of New South Wales. And of course, let's be honest, there's something special about the social sciences, and it's a really great opportunity to celebrate what those studies are about. Social Sciences Week is about understanding who we are as a community, as a nation, also trying to shape us in our complexity and diversity to be a better country. And here at University of New South Wales, we've got scholars across faculties, across disciplines, who are celebrating this week with their students in an effort to understand and celebrate what we do together as social scientists. One key part of doing that is our Australian Human Rights Institute, which was launched recently at the University of New South Wales. It's one of the key vehicles for us to study in an interdisciplinary way what social science means. And I'm very glad that here tonight we have the director, Professor Louise Chappell, and of course Magda and myself are both on the board of directors of that institute as well. One thing about social sciences is that it is an opportunity to celebrate diversity and the impact of social sciences in Australia. And not only do we have Magda here tonight, and that's a really wonderful way of understanding and celebrating this part of study, but also I want to acknowledge that recently we had Rebel Wilson on campus as well, one of our alumni from law, who again illustrates that there's nothing like a law degree to send someone to comedy or in fact anything but practicing the law. And we're very proud at the law faculty that we have such an esteemed alumni who have done nothing but such. Now, tonight we're here to honour Magda with an honorary Doctorate of Letters, and this is going to be followed by Magda's keynote speech and a conversation with Associate Professor Jan Breckenridge from the UNSW School of Social Sciences. And to start that process off, I'd like to introduce Professor Ian Jacobs to the stage, our President and Vice-Chancellor of UNSW Sydney. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this happy, celebratory and fun occasion. It's wonderful to have you all here at UNSW. For those of you who are not frequent visitors to the university, I can assure you that we don't always dress like this. But it's fun occasionally to do it for special occasions. And today, we honour Ms. Magdalene Mary Szubanski, AO, for her eminent service to performing arts, equality, and the community. And it's an absolute thrill for the UNSW community and so many others to be able to do this. Magda is a leading Australian cultural figure and human rights advocate. Born to migrant parents in Liverpool in 1961, Magda inherited a deep sense of the importance of courage and social justice from her parents. In particular, her family's involvement in the Nazi resistance in Poland during World War II has had a profound effect on her. Magda, we can all be grateful, moved to Australia in 1965 and grew up in Melbourne's eastern suburbs, attending Siena College in Camberwell before studying philosophy and fine arts at the University of Melbourne. And it's there that she realised her vocation as a performer, and she toured the country with the University Review Too Cool for Sandals. During Magda's early career, an abundance of sketch show characters made her a household name in Australian homes. In 1985, she joined ABC's sketch show The D Generation, followed by Seven Network's Fast Forward in 1989. In 1995, she co-wrote, performed and produced the first all-female Australian sketch comedy television programme, Big Girls Blouse. She went on to reprise the iconic character she created in this show, Sharon, in 4 series of the sitcom Kath and Kim. There is no doubt that Magda is one of Australia's most popular and awarded actors and writers of this era. Her accolades are numerous and put her in distinguished company in the Australian entertainment industry. Magda has been awarded the AACTA Award for Best Guest or Supporting Actress in a TV Drama, the AFI Award for Best Actress in a Supporting Role, and 7 Logie Awards, including the awards for Best Comedy, Outstanding Comedy, and Most Popular Comedy Personality. She also holds 3 Australian Writers Guild Awards for Best Comedy and Best Comedy Script. There's more. In 2016, her memoir Reckoning won the New South Wales Premier's Literary Award for Non-Fiction, the Australian Book Industry Award for Biography, and the Australian Book Industry Award for Book of the Year. Magda came out as gay and a supporter of same-sex marriage in 2012. She's patron of 2010, an organisation that offers specialised services and counselling for LGBTQIA+ people, their families and communities. In 2017, due to her long-standing fame, she was one of the most prominent faces in the Yes campaign for the Australian Marriage Law Postal Survey. She is widely regarded as crucial to its success. In the same year, Magda was recipient of the nation's top free speech honour, the Voltaire Award. In recognition of her distinguished service to the performing arts as an actor, comedian and writer, and as a campaigner for marriage equality, Magda was made an Officer of the Order of Australia in 2019. She's a member of the advisory board for the Australian Human Rights Institute at UNSW, and we're so proud of that, and was on the panel for the Institute's launch event in 2018, which was held in this very hall, discussing the value of the arts in engaging and mobilizing the public on human rights issues. Magda is an exceptional Australian who has led as a TV and film actress, author, comedian, and human rights campaigner. Her dedication, humility, and courage are an inspiration to anyone wanting to make a difference in our society through the arts and activism. The University Council, noting her eminent service to the performing arts and equality, resolved that it would be fitting if the degree of Doctor of Letters honoris causa were to be conferred on Miss Magdalene Mary Szubanski AO. Today, we admit her to the university's highest honour, and I invite Magda to join me on the stage to receive the award. Come over, come to the middle of the stage. And you have to face me. Perfect. What a great occasion. In the name, be serious for a moment. In the name of the Council, and by my authority as Vice-Chancellor, it gives me great pleasure to admit you to the degree of Doctor of Letters honoris causa. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Stay there, stay there.
I will go back a bit.
This is just the start of the fun. I'd now like to invite Magda to say a few words before she presents this evening's keynote speech, which is entitled Thrown to the Lions, How to Survive the Cyber Marketplace of Ideas. Thank you, Magda. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Wow. This is an extraordinary moment. Can you hear me properly? Yeah, is it loud enough? Yeah? That's a bit better. First of all, I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the Bedegal people, the traditional owners of this land, and I would like to thank Peter so much for his beautiful welcome and acknowledge the traditional owners past, present and emerging. And I want to take a moment to actually say how special it is that we are meeting in this place and that we have been welcomed to meet in this place. Because to me it's akin to the Irish saying to the British, or the English rather, welcome. You are safe in our land. And sometimes I think we say these, give these acknowledgements in a way that we don't always feel really just quite how much that means. So I, for one, as a migrant, am extremely grateful to be able to stand here in this country that, notwithstanding the experience that Peter and his people have had, is one of the more successful and peaceful multicultural countries. I just have to get my phone out. Oh, just 1 second, hang on. Hey Siri, set the timer for 20 minutes. Set the timer for 20 minutes.
Okay.
Done. Right. Okay. So I also would like to acknowledge some other people who are part of the reason that I'm here. Professor Ian Jacobs, thank you very much for conferring the degree on me. It's a great honour. Professor George Williams, Associate Professor David Blaser, Associate Professor Jan Breckenridge, and Professor Louise Chappell, who, frankly, where are you, Louise? Is a very big part of the reason that I'm here. I was going to prepare a speech, but I've had pretty nasty bronchitis, and I just couldn't get my brain going. And that kind of makes me think really about what the whole purpose of this talk is, and that is communication. In the beginning was the Word. And at the end of last year, I had the very unpleasant experience of losing the ability to speak. Not metaphorically, literally. I was sitting at home with my friend Kristen, who's here, and I started feeling a bit odd. And she said, I think we'll take you to the doctor. Went to the doctor, and as I was there being examined, I went to speak. I opened my mouth to speak, and no words would come out. I felt like my brain had run out of petrol, and I was literally unable to get any words out. And it was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. Naturally, I was rushed off to hospital. They diagnosed a mini stroke, a TIA, and I was sent home. The next day, the same thing happened, and I was sent back to hospital. Luckily, it kept happening. That sounds very counterintuitive, but the fact that it was repeating meant that, in fact, it wasn't a stroke. And it was later diagnosed as a stress-induced migraine sans migraine, which means a migraine without migraine. The principal symptom of which was aphasia, the inability to speak. And I think until you have literally lost the ability to speak, it's hard to understand just how crucial a part of your humanity communication is. We are Homo sapiens, the wise Homo. And you may think that the title of this, you know already about the history of what I've done with marriage equality, and you may think that the title here refers to me being thrown to the lions in terms of the sort of coliseum that the cyber marketplace of ideas has become. But actually, what has been thrown to the lions is communication, is language, is our ability to speak to one another in a meaningful, honest way where we can actually build trust and build and the underpinnings of society, which is, language and communication is really the absolute basis of democracy. It's the basis of civilization, and proper debate and discussion are required always. Now, there's always been people who game the system. There's always been people who lie to us. There's always been people who spin. But through the various engagements I've had with campaigns and with increasing presence on Twitter, I've noticed certain sinister trends happening. So everyone's familiar with the idea of the pylon. And normally this is interpreted as a kind of unthinking herd behaviour. But so for two things, there was marriage equality, and then more recently, some friends and I, in response to Israel Folau, when he started a GoFundMe page, some of those people are here today, when he started a GoFundMe page to raise his legal fees to support him in his case against Rugby Australia. Some of us wanted to send a message out to particularly at-risk LGBTQI youth to let them know that not everyone thinks they're going to hell. So we started an alternate, non-combative. We thought, how can we approach this in a way that is not the typical kind of Twitter war or adversarial approach to dealing with these things. And the reason we did that was because a bunch of us, 20 of us, many of whom are here, had recently come back from a trip to Israel and Palestine, organised by the New South Wales Jewish Board of Deputies, and it was a dual narrative trip. and it was called Give Peace a Chance. And the whole point of it was to go to both sides, to Israel and to Palestine, and to get beneath the narrative, beneath the stories of the conflict, and meet real people who are talking like proper human beings to one another without the baggage of the stories that they and their friends and families and communities have told one another since time immemorial. So it was a fascinating experience to meet these people. There's not a lot of them, to be frank. And I come from that sort of, lefty background where it's like an article of faith that, you side with the Palestinians. But really, my sort of departure from any kind of ideology occurred very young. I started out working in a women's refuge when I was 19. I was a volunteer. And I soon realised that there was a form of feminism that was a kind of linguistic tyranny and an actual tyranny. We all know the thing if you couldn't wear lipstick. Or, heaven forbid, go to McDonald's. But there was also that kind of thing of like, it was more to do with a sense of being in a club. That if you thought and spoke a certain way, that if you used words in a certain way, if you used all the key words, it was like being a Freemason. It was a signal to other people that you belonged to that club. You subscribed to those ideas unquestioningly. You accepted the articles of faith. And that, really did not sit well with me. And then shortly after that, I went to Poland. And I saw the other side of things where it was communism that was the oppressive enemy. And so I've since then really, and probably in a lot of ways all my life, thanks to my father, had a very sensitive Eastern European ear for the sort of moods and feelings that sort of rustle through the herd. And I'm very sensitive to the ways in which language can be used to, as Czesław Miłosz says, create the captive mind. So I actually felt in the political wilderness for a very long time because I didn't really subscribe to any belief just because it was an ideology and it was handed to me. I got a reputation as being a fence sitter. No one likes a fence sitter. As one friend said, do you know what happens to fence sitters? They get a cut fanny. Alrighty then. But throughout the experience of marriage equality, I learnt that I've always had a tendency towards idealism, and I thought that was the moral position. But as we worked with people from both sides of the aisle and other bits of the aisle or whatever it is, I suppose it's not an aisle then, I started to realise that actually to just stay in your corner and fight your corner is not necessarily a moral position at all. It just makes you feel moral. It makes you feel good. And there were certainly people who I encountered on all sides who were, look at Warren Entsch. You meet him, honestly, he's like what's the best way? An overweight Crocodile Dundee, really. He's got like a crocodile skin skin under his coffee table in his office. And such an incredible ally. I also realised as being part of a vulnerable minority that you need allies and that it is so easy, it's so much more easy to see who your enemies are than to see who your friends are. So going on this, after that experience of marriage equality, and I'll go a little bit more into that actually, that was when I really started to cop nasty trolling. But I noticed interesting things were going on with the trolling, which was that it was this strange kind of ripping apart of language, ideology, left, right. There would be piles on when I said certain words. If I mentioned climate change, this huge pile on, particularly of gun-toting men from America who don't even follow me. There'd be pile-ons of these people commenting if I said anything about climate change or gender. And I began to think that they were orchestrated. I know I'm not the first person to talk about Russian troll farms, but the whole idea of that somehow that social media might auto-correct itself, that it is a marketplace and that some invisible hand is going to come in and direct the morals and the ethics of all of us who are engaged in that marketplace, I think is very mistaken. In my experience, I noticed that there were concerted attacks at certain times, and there was also a strange thing, very strange thing going on where kind of lefty politics, assumptions were made about how left I was or wasn't, but lefty arguments were used to attack me, so that when, in response to the Israel Folau, we started up our own GoFundMe called For Love. Thanks, Kristen, who came up with that name. Kristen also came up with Foxy Moron, just FYI. So it was, we started this For Love campaign, and the idea was to raise money for children's cancer and just be this different way, after our experiences in Israel and Palestine, to go about in a non-combative way, exploring the idea of communicating. And I would have thought that starting a GoFundMe to raise funds for children with cancer would have been a good thing, but the onslaught I received after that, after announcing this GoFundMe, and we raised over like $275,000, was the most sustained and vicious attack I've ever encountered in my life. It was nasty, it was personal. There's sort of an order of things, like a lot of it's about me being fat, because I think maybe that's because there aren't laws to protect fat people. Just putting that forward. And I'm going to start that one. I'm going to talk to Rebel Wilson, and even though she did her degree in space law, there would be attacks on my weight, attacks on my integrity, telling me I'm not funny, all of the usual things. But there was this really strange thing, because it was a group of Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Catholic, I sort of separate the two in my head, atheist, LGBTQI, and straight people. And I would get all these attacks coming from sort of alt-right camps, accusing me of being anti-feminist because I was siding with Muslim people who, and homophobic, by the way. Oh, Marcia Langton and I both got called homophobic. That's the whole. We're going to start our own podcast, actually, and we're going to start off with the line, "What's the most politically incorrect thing you've ever done in your life?" and then go from there. I'll let you know when that happens. And so it was this thing, I think, I don't know if you've noticed this, but it's this strange kind of like a gumbo of kind of, left-right politics. It's all mixed in together, where they attempt to hoist you on your own petard, assuming they seem to think that they know what your petard is in order to hoist you on it. But what it struck me as was the frequency of them, the use of language, the people they were coming from, when they would happen, it wasn't just the content, it was the volume. And the intention was nothing other than to disrupt, to destroy debate and proper discussion, and to undermine and rip apart that fabric, those fine threads of communication that bond us together. I was born on the 1st of April, 12th of April. Oh my God, I don't even know. Well, I'm a fool. I'm still a bit bronchitis-y, so this could go anywhere. Probably already has. The day that Yuri Gagarin was the first man, he was a Russian cosmonaut and the first man launched into space. And he was the first human being to see the globe from the outside, to see the Earth. And he looked back and said, "Isn't it beautiful? How extraordinary. It's blue." Because before that time, we didn't even know what colour we were. So as that perspective is shifting, you 58 years later, and now that globe is surrounded by satellites spinning, orbiting endlessly, weaving that worldwide web of communication. And there are people in there who have agendas, who are agents, who really deliberately want to disrupt all of that. And how do you, when there is a mixture of people who are psychologically unbalanced, there are people of very different views, there are people with different levels of ability to communicate, and there are sort of malevolent actors. One of the things when they talk about non-violent communication, which sometimes, frankly, can be very boring, I feel that when you do this, one of the things they talk about in order to be able to do that effectively is that you have to know what you're feeling. Now, given that most of us, you go to the doctor's office and there's a chart there with a list of pictures of faces and that's how you're meant to identify your feelings. That's how hopeless we are. We have to have a chart to tell us what we're feeling. So whilst we have verbal skills to varying degrees, in some ways it's also, and probably almost worse, our own ignorance of what really drives us. So that when we enter into that marketplace, we're bringing with us a whole lot of drivers, a whole lot of emotions, a whole lot of feelings about things, a whole lot of preconceptions, some of which we're not even aware that we have ourselves. So I think there are several things. I think one of the first things is to actually understand yourself the best that you can, so that you know what it is that you're bringing in. What agendas are you bringing in? What prejudices? What narrative, as we learned in Israel and Palestine? And when you do that, I found, weirdly, I started to really think about, so I kind of conducted a bit of an experiment on the weekend. It was genuine, but it was also a bit of a this would be interesting. These idiots were talking about that humour is inherently masculine. Did you see that stuff? Yeah. So I thought, there's a couple of ways I could go about this. I could write a really reasonable tweet and see what happens, or I could really stir the pot. So given that I was talking about this, I chose the latter, and I went in all guns blazing. And I said, I had to cop this shit decades ago, and how does this, And I kind of let rip because often I can't, because they're literally sometimes there are lives at stake. But this is just comedy, it's not that big a deal. Lots of likes. Media outlets contacted me, and it developed into a story in its own. And it's because of that old thing of, as Julian McCrossan said to me when we went to Israel and Palestine, there is no room for a nuanced discussion, because the bottom line is with the news, if it bleeds, it leads. So when you're wanting to achieve cut-through, a very advertising term, the problem is that those kind of things are what get people's attention. Even with this, if I hadn't said thrown to the lions and been a bit dramatic about it, it possibly wouldn't resonate. And, thanks, Siri. I'm going to ignore Siri, I'm going to keep talking. But I did notice one thing happened because, I've been famous a long time and I've got all these awards and stuff, and it's really great. But it's always that one nasty comment on Twitter that just gets stuck in your craw no matter what. And And when I had that pile-on after the Israel Folau thing, and it was really vicious, and Julia Baird actually came to my defence, and Folau actually then tried to call the attack dogs off. It didn't work, but anyway. Thank you, Julia Baird, though. I had never really understood, you know how people sometimes kill themselves from Twitter attacks? And I'd never really gotten that until it happens to you. And it is a form of psychological warfare. And it's so intense. I had nightmares that night. And I'm a pretty, I've been in this business now for a long time. I've got a very great support system. I've got therapists, plural. So I'm someone who's very well resourced and has a lot of support and backup. I can call Lyndall if I'm having a... She kindly offered her services if I'm having a really terrible time. I've got my friends, but and also I have the pre-existing fame, so and familiarity, so people know me and they trust me. But people who are going in on their own without a reputation, without any structure or support, they then can actually be ripped to shreds for the amusement of the crowd in the cyber coliseum. I'd like to say that Twitter doesn't matter, that it's just a small percentage of people, but given that the leader of the free world uses it as his only means of communicating, I think we know that it does matter. And also there's some excellent books out there talking about the fact that there are people with various all sorts of agendas who can, in extremely subtle ways, infiltrate their way into the dialogue via Facebook, via all sorts of elements of social media in a way that you can't even recognise and wouldn't even know that it's trying to persuade you. The old hidden persuaders. It's just that in a new version. But given all of that. Twitter's not going away. It can also be enormous fun. I've had some hilarious conversations with people across the globe that I've never even met and never will. Made friends with some people. And it certainly was a way that I could get out a lot of the arguments for marriage equality. Because I believe that, if someone says something, I'm like, set the record straight. Get it out there, because there's always third parties watching. But the bottom line is, it only is and only ever will be us, Homo sapiens, the talking ape, that decide and create and co-create this cyberspace. So we need to inform ourselves. We need to know who the players are. We need to know what they're doing. We need to protect one another. And we also need to lay down our arms. Not be so ready to judge, listen a little bit more. And I think one of the things that's missing, I noticed when I got into a few sort of Twitter stoushes, I just thought, don't enter the conflict. There was someone that said to me, it was a masseuse when I was doing marriage equality, wisdom can come to you from so many places. And I was like, how do I do this? How do I... I would go around talking to everyone. What do I say? What am I meant to do? I know there's so much at risk here. Not just in Australia, but imagine if Australia had voted no. Imagine in Putin's Russia, where they're hunting LGBTQI people now. Imagine if Australia had voted no. Or where my family lives in Poland, where there are magazines issuing stickers saying LGBTQI free zone. To me, I knew that was, that we think we're not important, but we matter within the Commonwealth. And that also would have been used as an argument by those people who really want to persecute LGBTQI people. So there was a lot at stake. And, I felt very stressed. My mum was dying. It was a terrible time. And this masseuse said to me, when you speak, think of what is best for the higher good of all people in this country. And that's actually a spiritual solution. Because I've been around politics for so long, and it's about power, And it's not really about anything else, and it will provide no real, new or interesting solutions. I think a lot of organised religion is about power also. But I think whatever that form of, what is it? It's like some kind of a, I don't know if you want to call it collective unconscious or whatever, but some sense of something bigger that takes you out of the conflict, that takes you out of the strife, that makes you not a player, not a purveyor, not a promoter. We met with people in Israel and Palestine who had lost loved ones. A Palestinian woman who had lost her husband, an Israeli man who had lost his daughter, a Palestinian man who had become a terrorist, and then after 10 years in prison, he taught himself to read English and Hebrew. He read Martin Luther King, and he read Nelson Mandela, and he watched Schindler's List. And that understanding the suffering of Jewish people completely, you want to talk about start a revolution, that's the kind of revolution I'm interested in. The politics, the old stories, I just freaking don't care. I don't want to hear it, I don't want to know. Because it hasn't gotten us anywhere. You know, there were IDF soldiers who are working with ex-terrorists for peace. And as I said, they're a handful of people. But that is where all of my efforts, all of my heart, soul and mind, that's where my efforts will go into. Because that gift that we have, 70,000 years ago, whatever it was, when we made that leap, and we were given the gift of language. Words are my life, and I lost them for a while, and they are so precious to me. I speak them, I write them, I coin them, Got one word to say to you. Nice, different, unusual. So don't, I think the poets, the cliche is the enemy. As Margaret Atwood said, war is the failure of language. So we have to be vigilant. We have to not use academic jargon even. And we have to, that's why I didn't really want to write something. I just wanted to talk with you, And I want you to ask me questions, and we're quite happy to go over time. I don't care. Rules, schmools, whatever. I think I've said enough. I've gone over time. I'm enormously honoured to receive this doctorate. I always wanted to be a doctor. A brain surgeon, but but what I really hope, and I've loved, even thus far, all the interactions I've had with Louise and the Institute of Human Rights, and although human rights has sort of become a toxic word, hasn't it? According to the trolls. I'm really looking forward to working with this eclectic group of people, this interdisciplinary approach, to find new ways so that we can actually, I said, in the press release, I said, the Third World War has already begun, because I wanted to get, if it bleeds, it leads. So I said, Third World War has already begun. And in a sense it has, because wars begin long before they begin. They begin in our hearts, in our minds, in our ideas, in the stories that we tell one another, in the stories that we tell ourselves, in an effort to protect ourselves from imagined imminent dangers. So all of us have to be vigilant, not just about other people, but really about ourselves. And I think that we're at this amazing place in time where a lot of the foundations are starting to crack. And there's a possibility that, as that hoary old, Ernest Hemingway, oh God, my mind. And he said, and I never really appreciated it until I've written more and spoken more, how hard it is to write one true sentence. And my hope is that all of us, when we go, we'll question the jargon, question the received wisdoms, so that all of us can communicate and find that one true sentence. Thank you. Oh,
Mic's not working. I've had to problem solve already.
we do. Oh, we're yeah.
Yep.
Oh, my mic's not working.
Yes, you're got him in the middle. I'm really pleased tonight to be here as Interim Head of Social Sciences for Social Sciences Week, and we couldn't be celebrating it in any better way than to have Magda. And the topic is really at the heart of a lot of what we do in the social sciences, to critique, to think.
Wave. Sorry, there's no video now. Hi. So crass.
They said control the situation. It is impossible. It is Mercury. But I have a surprise for Magda. And I have a surprise for you. And we have the wonderful Julia Baird, who's going to join us tonight. And I'd just like to give her a big round of applause.
You did an amazing job. I think I look like back for the Swans, but anyway. Yeah.
Oh, it's fabulous. I love it.
I'm glad you could make it because
Yes,
you nearly thought you couldn't.
I know.
Now, you two, remember I'm the interviewer. Okay?
Are you?
I'm not sure if this
Are
is
you?
working.
That's right, am I?
Yeah, good luck is yeah.
Good luck is right. Look, I think to start off with, I mean, many of us in the audience have had experience of being trolled, of having people despise what we stand for or not agree with our research, and it becomes highly personalised. And I've been looking at a lot of the tweeting, and we can't be funny tonight because we're three women, so we'll have to do our best to be passable for the audience.
Bloody Christopher Hitchens with that stupid, bogus article.
Yep.
You
Anyway,
know, the one that women... Oh, sorry.
moving on. Magda, what's it been like for you? I mean, you've talked about it a little bit in your speech, but how do you actually cope? When you see those written words, what is it that you respond to?
Well, when I was always really reluctant to get into Twitter because, you know, Eastern European fear of the mob, and my Jewish friends get it. It's totally know what when I say the mob, they know what I mean. And that you'd had that experience, but I was after the Israel Folau thing, and I got so inundated, and it is the volume of it. It's the amount of it. It's so unrelenting, and inevitably, it's like the number of monkeys that eventually they'll hit on something that actually is your vulnerable spot. You know, something that you feel bad about. This is why that thing of self-knowledge, if you're going in there, you need to know, you know, like I've come to terms with my inner narcissism a long time ago, so it's hard to get me on that one. You know, come on, I'm an actor. But there will be something that hits a raw nerve, and sometimes it can be quite profound stuff. And that night, I had nightmares of voices telling me to kill myself. It was horrendous. Luckily, the voices in my nightmare actually argued back with those voices. Can you believe that? I thank my mother for that. But it really gets to you. And what saved me, and this is actually, I think, a really important thing, is that you came to my defence.
And that's my question, Julia. What made you decide to tweet back? Why did you become a bystander that did something?
Yeah, well, because I think the role of the bystander is pretty important. But it was just, it was on a weekend or something, was it? And I just opened my computer and I was... thought I'd take a look at Twitter, just opening the lid of the sewer, you know, to see if there were any lilies sprouting in there.
Ever-flowing.
Which they do
They
sometimes.
do, yeah.
And I suddenly saw this torrent of abuse on Magda. And I was like, of all people, I mean, of all people to direct hate about. And what did she say? We should raise some money for kids with cancer. We should raise some money, you know, and look after people. And
Aren't
I was
I
just
awful?
You're
I
a
know.
terrible human being. And I was just so incensed by it, on a number of levels. You know, not just it's obvious who Magda is. I mean, you can see on her face, you know, what's that Roald Dahl thing about, that your thoughts appear on your face. And it's obvious that Magda does not have ugly thoughts. I mean, you've got such a beautiful, gentle face, and your presence in Australian public life has been you've been vulnerable, you've spoken about love and inclusiveness. Like, I've never heard you say anything intolerant or unkind.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Right? And it just... She's like, keep talking.
I told you I'm up myself.
And who said I could control it?
No, but I do. I'm really careful with that stuff.
You're
and
right.
Yeah,
and so I noticed that. Yes, you're fabulous.
And you.
And also the fact that it was being, done in the name of a crusade about faith and about Christianity. And I have a faith, and I have struggled with the institutional church, and I've done so publicly about what's happened to women and situations of abuse, sexual abuse, domestic violence, LGBTQI. But I have a strong faith, and it makes me furious that the name of God or in the question of faith can be used for narrowness and hate, and that it's somehow been captured by a group of people who want to restrict and confine and shut people up or troll them. I mean, it's just...
Especially this was an interfaith group, and I had Muslim friends who I invited to be part of that group as well. And then the attacks on that, I mean, God help you if you're a Muslim person commenting on anything, Yeah. I mean, I'm Sharon Strzelecki. I'm a bit like Bambi, So it is.
And yet there they were.
Yeah, and so you can be Bambi and they'll still shoot you.
Right. Yeah. So I came on and was just saying, for those people who are trying to attack Magda, and you're saying that you're doing this in the name of your faith, you cannot preach love in the language of hate. Or peace in the language of war. And, Jesus told people to love their enemies, not to hate them. And then I said, if you think Magda is an enemy, and I've never heard her talk as though she's an enemy of anyone. And I was amazed when Folau picked that up and said, he tweeted back 2 days later and said, I agree with Julia Baird, which I never hear on Twitter.
But did you get any hate? Did anyone? I mean, it's interesting because
Did it become a pile-on?
Yeah.
No, and especially when I think it did stop things for a little while when he came in.
It did, and the thing was, I think it wasn't pretty much. One of his club mates said, "Oh, that wasn't Israel. He wouldn't even know who Magda and Julia Baird are." That was his PR people.
That's right.
But
I suspect that's true.
Yeah, I totally.
Oh, of me, not of you.
Oh, yeah, because he said, "Oh no, I fully support." It was just like, yeah. But no. I mean, I don't think either of us. Sorry, but I think the thing is, what it demonstrated to me is how if someone actually comes to your aid in that moment, that just turned it around for me, because I was sinking a bit, to be honest. So I'm very grateful. I sent you a message saying how grateful I was, but. I was surprised how it got to me. I remember when Charlotte Dawson killed herself, and I was like, I didn't really kind of get it. I was, in a sense, I'm not trivialising it, but I'm like, why would you let it get to you? But it does.
Yeah.
And you have the choice either, like, do I get out of the thing and let them have it, or do I participate? It's hard to...
Right.
Can I ask you both a question? One thing that I have wondered, and I see it particularly with young people, they put their whole lives out on Facebook. Like, they say things that I think you would never say that to someone face to face. Do you think the anonymity of social media is really allowing people to say things that are really quite hateful? Is it more hateful than it has been previously?
Oh, I think 100% anonymity brings out cowardice, and people say things that they would never say to you, ever. And I quite often find if I write back, they'll go, "Oh, hey, no, I didn't really mean that. I didn't mean to offend you." You know what I mean? It's almost like kind of like being noticed in that sense.
I had one guy who was vile to me for ages, and I blocked him, and he rang my agent and cried to her for 20 minutes saying, "Please get Magda to unblock me."
Wow.
But people are... There are psychological phenomena going on with this. There was a guy, we did this current affair interview, and it was in the street, and I went up to this guy. They told him I was going to do it. He was a no voter because he was sick of having the Yes campaign shoved down his throat. And I went up to him and I said, "Hi," and his resistance melted instantly. And he went, "Oh, no, it's fine. Actually, oh, yeah, no, seeing you." I didn't say a word. I just said, "Hi," and he went, "Look, actually, I probably will vote yes now." And
just had to meet everyone.
We have to meet everyone in the world all the time. Yeah. But there is. But what is underneath? What's underneath that? Why are people so angry? I think
people have always been angry, but I think it empowers people to have that anonymity. I think that, and I think people forget when you're not talking to a real person.
Yeah.
It's like you can say things because it's not a real person. And you tweeted this week that someone looked you in the eye and resistance melted because that.
Oh yes,
that
same
contact.
for me. I was sitting at the airport. And there are a bunch of black-clad Orthodox priests sitting there. And, thoughts are running through my head, the abuse scandal, all the, power patriarchs, I was doing all of that rant, in my head. And then one of them came over to me, beaming with this beautiful face, and he said, I just want to say I'm such a fan. And I just went, I'm such an asshole. Disintegrated. Right. And it was, he shook my hand, and then I ended up talking to the Archbishop and the new Archbishop, and he didn't really know who I was or speak much English, but I said, I like your hat. And but it was for me.
And you've got one now.
And I've got my own silly hat. But there is something about that personal thing. But I think there's also a higher level of anger, and I wonder if some of that, can we do a study into it? I wonder if some of that is, I think particularly, the Holocaust, but then also 9/11, the GFC. I think there's a level of, and the world the way it is at the moment. One of the classic signs of trauma and fear is irritability. I don't know if that's
I think there's politics of hate and division too. Like, you look at a lot of the media that's out there, and I know you're both in the media, and I love both of you. But, there's often the racialisation of some of the commentary. And, like in some of my area is gendered violence. And someone said that I wouldn't be satisfied until I'd established a caliphate. And I thought, where did that come from?
Right.
Yeah.
We don't like Muslims. We don't like this one. We don't like gays and lesbians. We don't like, know.
I feel a real sense of responsibility with that, actually, because when we bring people on my show, on the drum, then if they're Indigenous, they're going to be trolled. If they're Muslim, they're going to be trolled. If it's women, we know it's going to be worse. And sometimes people have had to actually get friends to come in and go through their feed late at night. And we've wondered, should we not be on Twitter? We expose people to that. We think about it all the time. That takes a certain act of courage to step into that sphere. And it's important to have dissident voices on places like Twitter. It's important to be there so you can guard a little bit. But I think it's a bit...
and that is that... Well, you hope that the wisdom of crowds, as they call it, will prevail, that it might autocorrect. But really, there are also that thing I was talking to you about, that article, of people in there who really are absolutely gaming the system. And that's very scary.
Right. I think it's... there's an episode of Black Mirror when you can actually cancel a person, and you can't see what they say or do. They just become an outline with a blur in it, with disastrous consequences, of course, in the episode. But, you kind of almost have to do that with hate. When something comes at you, you just identify that as hate. I got this terrible thing the other day, and I almost it's so personal, but it's it tells you the kind of awful things that we can get in this space, which is, I've had a couple of major operations for cancer. I've been very sick. I was really sick this year, and I've only just recovered. And I came and I wrote a piece which really upset people in the New York Times, because I wrote about the fact that all these prominent men always talk about their penises. Unfortunately, the headline was, "What I know about famous men's penises."
Yes.
I was like, oh my gosh, my mother's going to think I've been out there being shagging my way around. Anyway, and
that's
writing
what I heard
afterwards. Okay. And so anyway, someone wrote to me furious and said something like, when we hear, and she'd obviously gone and researched me, and she said, we hear about people like you, and I just give thanks for cancer. Cheers to cancer. I hope that cancer eats your bones, you baby murdering something bitch.
Yeah.
And I was like, you poor creature. What must be eating you alive is whatever that is inside you. And I just wrote back and I said, I just hope, and in return, I wish you good health
Yeah.
and for the rest of your life. And I just hope that whatever hate is inside you dissipates and you find peace. And that's the only way I could see it, was just this big kind of blob of hate. And I think that's different. I think that's a really, really dark, like the Westboro Baptist Church, you know, those people that hold up God hates fags outside funerals where people die of HIV. That's evil. And then there's kind of the trolling. And another thing that I've experienced is people really resisting authority. Women... and this would have happened to you too, Magda. Your authority and the fact that you're listened to in a public space makes some people furious in a way they cannot articulate.
Yeah.
And I found once someone had said something about, I think it was about Barnaby Joyce, and I'd said if it was Barbara Joyce, we would have known about it. It was just when the story was early breaking about the pregnancy and whatnot. And I said if it was Barbara Joyce, we would have known about this a lot earlier. And someone came back to me and said, do you even know anything about this, or are you just a bitter old sexist? And I wrote back, well, actually, I have written a PhD on the topic, so it is Dr. Bitter Old Sexist, right? And so they that set off, that ignited this incredible storm of trolling for people who could not handle the fact that I had asserted authority. And I noticed that other people too had the same issue with doctor. So you have to put that in your.
I'm totally putting doctor in there now.
And now I can.
And I'm putting inherently funny, feminine.
Yes.
Doctor.
And I can tell if someone's going to be trolling me because they're like, well, just ask Dr. Baird about that. They all use it as this kind of ironic, how could you possibly just, have an honorific that reflects something that a lot of people do, is quite a bit of work, and that's all it means.
But I think it is incumbent on all of us to...
Sorry.
Breathe through your nose.
Sorry.
It's when you're choking, it's what you do. Dr. Magda. But I think, that whole thing of, what did I get called? Oh, yeah, someone said Kath and Kim is about, it's the elite having a crack at, the middle classes or working classes or anything. And I said, I grew up in the outer suburbs of Melbourne. I mean, my mum worked in a bloody assembly line in a factory, and their kitchen looks exactly like the kitchen in Kath and Kim. I'm talking about the world that I grew up in. And someone said, oh, please spare us the poverty virtue signalling. And I'm like, I'm not virtue signalling, I'm just saying this is actually a world I know. But I had, through marriage equality, I was called a pedophile, I was called, you name it, yeah. And it's, there's a lot of the fat shaming is a really big one that I get a lot, like really, really nasty fat shaming, and that actually doesn't affect me at all, but there'll be other things. Do you have, there are some things that get you and some things that don't?
I think so. I'm just trying to think. I mean, I'm immune to so much of it now.
Yeah, you do toughen up is the other good thing, isn't it?
But I think one of the things is we're talking a lot about ideas, and the kind of ideas you're trying to convey in your work are really important. They're significant issues in the world, and yet people's responses are about you're too fat, or you've had cancer, or they're highly personalised, they're vicious, they're nasty, and they look at your particular grouping. They'll racially profile me, or they'll pick on things that they think are going to be hurtful, and the discussion of genuine ideas and debate is lost in social media often.
I think you can get some stuff through, which is the reason that I bother with it. There are often third parties who are watching and reading, and so even though the answers that are coming back at you are just absolutely abusive and frequently don't make sense at all.
Grammar's the problem.
Grammar's often
There is no grammar. I'm sorry, there's none.
Elitist. But you still have that ability to reframe the discussion sometimes, I think, because there are other people who are watching on. But a lot of my things since marriage equality has been about wrenching things away from the extremes, because I do really feel the extremes of both sides are just as bad. You're just as likely to get a really nasty one with a teardrop next to it as a water drop next to it as from alt-right.
Little egg.
And the egg. I think we all have to really, that's why I'm so thrilled to be with the Institute here and thinking about how do we create a sort of new language, a new way of connecting.
But you have done that. You say that all those things are lost. To some extent that's true, but unfortunately you almost have to accept that is part of public life now. Like that is actually, and we talk about it, and I think we need to report people, and you block it. But I do think there's a role for vigilantes. You were using that word before, and I used to call
vigilant, not vigilante.
Oh,
but
vigilantes,
yeah.
Vigilantes like of grace, or that can kind of come in and surround people. I see it happen online, and you see it in kind of groups and in communities, and it really makes a difference. We think about the digital world as, for too long we thought about it as this abstraction.
Yeah.
But it's real. That bullying is real bullying. You feel it in your body.
You do,
You
don't
lose
you?
sleep.
Yeah.
Like it's a tangible thing. That harassment is real. And so when people come in to defend you there, it is as though someone's stopping a street fight. I mean, that can be, have a similar impact.
Then it's a horrible feeling though if then they pile on the person who's had a go at you. So,
Right.
I mean, I suppose the thing I would say is like what you did was not a pile-on. But, if you're one of those persons who's a bystander when it's happening to someone else, intervene, but try to not be a part of the conflict. Try to think of some way to actually lift out of that narrative of the conflict and make some sort of comment that doesn't actually make it worse.
Yeah, and I think that's a crucial thing, is to be careful not to shame that person too. It's like how to act back in a kind of a decent way. And I did make that mistake, not just recently. Someone called me a slut and, and I just retweeted it that I was a slut. Unfortunately, my daughter then saw that, which was... She just wrote rude next to it.
I do the retweet.
And that person's name was there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So then everyone keeps attacking that, and I'm like, but then it's all in my mentions, and I have to keep thinking about this, me and my sluttiness for days.
Do you know what, you two? This screen is going to go absolutely berserk, and they've given me 2 warnings now, and I've ignored them. So
we've got question time, haven't we?
No, we haven't.
Oh.
We got rid of the questions this morning.
Oh, did we?
Yeah.
Communication is my jam, and look at how I just stuffed that up. Didn't even know that.
But I would like to say, Julia,
can we do questions? Couple?
Can you see the board? The board is going absolutely...
Oh, anyone who wants to go, you can go.
I knew this was going to happen. I knew. But I'm going to give you presents before... You've got presents. Julia, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, darling.
And Magda.
Thank you.
Now you've got to take it out.
Hang on.
I can hold the mic.
Yes.
Only a true social scientist gets to wear that jacket. Rebel Wilson's was nowhere near as good.
I would hope not.
Anyway, I would love to have questions, but I can tell you that it's possibly not going to happen, or my neck's on the line. No, it's not. Louisa said it's not, so it's not.
Computer says no.
Computer says no. So, but can I ask you to just put your hands together for 2 wonderful discussants? It was good. It was good. And our very wonderful Dean of Arts and Social Sciences is going to close. And he's been waiting over there for hours, the poor darling, for us to stop. Oh.
I was a bit worried. I thought I'd come on too soon when you... Sorry, yes. I'm the man in the suit and the silly costume whose job it is to close with some, I guess, suitably platitudinous remarks. But I actually don't feel like doing that after the talk we've heard, both Magda's talk and the in conversation, of which unfortunately I couldn't hear very much sitting where I was sitting. But nonetheless, it's moved me in various ways. So I really do very much sincerely want to thank you, Magda, for coming and sharing your thoughts with us and your ideas, and Julia for joining that wonderful in conversation. But I'd actually also like to thank you, Magda, for doing something that I think should be done more often, which is to call out the importance of the welcome to country and to stop and think what an extraordinary generosity of spirit is required for the Indigenous people of this place to welcome us to their country. And so thank you for doing that. I've been both moved and kind of disheartened by your talk, because it keeps posing to me that problem of how on earth do we create or recreate the space in which civil discourse can actually happen. We have never needed civil discourse more than we need it now. And I keep thinking of the Bob Dylan line, the Titanic sails at dawn, and everybody shouting, which side are you on? And that's the kind of space we've got to. And it seems to me it comes from a place of a desire for simplicity in a world that has become unbelievably and unbearably complex. So you get questions which require, actually in justice, require 2 volumes even to be asked, such as, should Britain leave the European Union, to which you give a one-word answer, yes or no, and then spend however long wrecking your polity trying to work out how to implement it. And again, wrecking your space for civil discourse, because that has been a debate characterised by pylons, by the kind of caricaturing and so on that you've talked about. UNSW Arts and Social Sciences, like any good part of any university, does work very hard to encourage this civil discourse, this respectful public debate. We try to contribute to the real world and do things that have impact. A task that becomes increasingly difficult as the space for civil discourse contracts and contracts and contracts. And so to have someone like you here, Magda, to talk to us about the importance of that based on your own experience, to have this wonderful audience to listen captivated to your remarks, and to the audience I thank you for coming and being interested in this topic and caring. I would just like to thank you very, very much for sharing that with us, and I would ask the audience to join me in a final round of applause for Magda Szubanski.